I want their leader brought here. I want him brought to me. I want the revolution crushed.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show. My name is Sim. Along with me is Sheikh Amir and Harry out of Indonesia.
Assalamu alaikum, nerds. How y'all doing?
Nerds and ninjas.
Nerds and ninjas and unicorns and puppy dogs and
little
shady
green men.
girls of the night.
Shady girls of the night?
Yeah, there's a lot of shady girls of the night around my neighborhood. Sometimes I go to the Arab places around here, and they're like, "Hey, mister, you want massage?" And it's like some 45-year-old woman who doesn't make ends meet by working at the cafe. And I'm like, "No, thanks."
This just took a
appreciate
weird
the
turn.
offer.
This just took a really
Is
weird
that a
turn.
big problem there?
It's not as much. It's more DNL than, say, Thailand. Thailand is pretty obvious. It's like Thailand overfloweth with that kind of nonsense. So.
And you were recently in Kuala Lumpur. How's that?
I was in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
How-
Kuala Lumpur is it's a nice town. It's basically Singapore for broke people. Singapore on a budget. It's like people can't afford a Porsche, so they buy a Honda Accord with all the special features on it instead.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I think you'd like KL. No. I think Sheikh Ismail would like KL as well.
Yeah, Ismail Kamdar is who Harry's talking about. Ismail Kamdar is a good friend of ours, and we've always been trying to nudge him in different directions in our conversations with him, trying to get him to. He's always trying to figure out which hijra destination to go to, and we're trying to maybe go to Indonesia or Malaysia and stuff. So that's what he's referencing.
But even about Kuala Lumpur, like I always had this question. I mean, I've never been, and it's almost at the level of it gets a little romanticized too. Is it everything? I mean, like just give us a lowdown kind of Kuala Lumpur, because I've never been. I've always wanted to live vicariously through other people who went there.
In the pictures, it looks amazing here.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
It is amazing. It's very nice. It's a very well-built city. I mean, Indonesia continues to just be Indonesia, and Malaysia continues to be accelerating into the future. But the thing about, I was talking with my wife about this, like, Malaysians are kind of cold. They're not rude.
Yeah.
But they're kind of like, they're not particularly friendly people. And part of the problem is like they've had so many immigrants come to Malaysia over the last 20, 30 years that they're now like, oh, we can't handle all these people.
So
You know,
a
it's
lot
like,
of expats living there when you
people-
go there.
There's a lot of expats. There's also, I'm going to adjust my camera while I'm talking to you guys. There's a lot of expats. There's also a lot of, people who have like permanent residency who are from China or India. And it's just like a lot of Malays, understandably, just feel like they've worn a, like, we've got too many people here.
Yeah.
There's the MAGA could easily be Malaysian MAGA, like there's too many people coming in. So I kind of feel that. I understand their grumpiness.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm definitely it's on one of my spots. I'm coming to this at least some point in the next few years. I want to make a decision whether to sell everything and just move to a Muslim country. I don't know which one, but Kuala Lumpur is right there, and Indonesia as well. Trying to figure out what I want to be able to own property there, right? And I know there's different mechanisms over there because you can't actually own property unless you're a citizen, but you can buy these like 1,000-year leases. You can have like these agreements with people. I know in Indonesia they have that, right, Harry? You can get like a 1,000-year lease agreement and kind of
That's kind of cool.
own a property. Weird
like
way.
100 years.
Something like that, 100-year. Yeah.
If you're gonna live past 100, I mean, honestly, I don't know what to do for you. Your problems far excel that. But
Yeah.
Doesn't Saudi have something like that too? Saudi's been opening up a lot of real estate for people with a 99-year
Yeah.
lease.
The thing
type
is
thing.
about owning property. It's not necessarily about how long you live, but it's actually about like trying to pass down wealth to your children. You know, things that you worked for, and that gives you the next generation a bit of a leg up, right? Um, that's something that how wealthy people usually transfer or make their children wealthy as well. It's a generational thing, you know. But yeah, we have a lot going on in terms of Iran, Iraq. Iran and Israel. Um, hopefully not Iraq again, but Iran has responded to Israel's blatant incursions into killing several of its officers and lots of different targeted airstrikes across Iran. And Iran responded with a barrage of about, seems like 500 rockets
Something
for sure.
like 200 to 400, I think. Something
Was
like
it 400?
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Iran's total ballistic missile capacity is considered around 5,000. So they spent a good amount on this response. Um, and it was when my initial reaction to Israel's attack was I was just really shocked by Iran's lack of preparedness, because at least from what we're seeing here in American media, we're seeing repeated warnings that Iran is about to attack, or Israel is about to attack Iran, like 48 hours before the actual
Yeah.
thing happened, maybe even 72 hours. But there was ample time, and based on the attacks that they've had on Hezbollah and stuff like that, they are going to be targeting key members of your leadership. So I was deeply disappointed that Iran was kind of hoping that there's going to be some kind of negotiation breakthrough with the United States, which was completely not in good faith, because if we know anything about the United States, we know that they would have greenlit Israel's attack on Iran. Israel doesn't just do it on their own. The United States gave it a green light. Now, imagine you're having discussions for peace with your partner, and behind your back, that partner you're negotiating with is signaling to another country to go ahead and attack you, you know, and provoke you and pull you into a war, effectively. And it's incredibly disingenuous and just so against what Donald Trump totally fought for. It was really shocking. It wasn't shocking when you look at overall American policy, but at least by the lip service that Donald Trump gave on during his election and stuff, and saying that he's the anti-war candidate, and was making fun of Biden all this whole time about how incompetent he is, and that he's someone who can make a deal happen. None of that happened, and he's frankly being embarrassed, even though he's trying to get ahead of the conversation and trying to put out tweets and stuff, but he's getting embarrassed by Israel. But go ahead, Harry. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of pushback. I don't think that Trump actually wanted this, but he failed.
Yeah,
He
I
could have
know.
done
I
more
agree
to
with
stop
you.
this.
I agree with you
He
there.
could have done. He could have done more to stop this, and he's doing this stupid game where he was trying to play tough, trying to make a deal, trying to negotiate. Um, Donald Trump did very, very well with tariffs and China, and this was something that, because he's a businessman, this was something he had a degree of knowledge and experience in. And it sounds a little pretentious because we're just a bunch of nerds sitting in your basement talking about this, and we're not, big fancy people working in Washington D.C. But anyone with half a brain could see that Ukraine is going nowhere, and the simple solution was literally to just pull the plug. And instead of doing that with Ukraine, he just decided to keep it going, and that's foolish. And the same thing with Iran here. He really. I was the couple other podcasts that I've been on, and I know I got into it with some of the people they've had on the show here, on the show where I said I'm not going to vote for Trump this time around because he's doing all the wrong things. And they got really upset, but he's the only option. He's better than Biden. I'm like, he's going to end up doing a lot of the same things that Biden did at the rate he's going. And unfortunately, this is true. And this situation with Iran is a perfect example of this. He had the opportunity where, he could have just let this go, and he didn't. I'll be back it up a little bit more than that. Starting back when he was first president in 2016 onwards, 2020, he's the one that tore up the JCPOA.
Yeah.
So he is, even though he is not interested in actually having a war, he has made one unforced error after another, trying to appeal to all these people, trying to make them happy. All these neocon boomers in his coalition, that he has now boxed us all in a corner. And, he's not going to get us directly involved, but we might still get hit anyways. And just like the Yemen took out 2 of our planes and really not destroyed, but seriously damaged a couple of our ships, don't be surprised if Iran sinks 1 or 2 of them. That's actually on the table now. Because we're sending more ships in now to the region.
Yeah.
2 new carriers or something like that is what I read. Might be just 1. But still, that's just a magnet for, Iranian missiles. It's stupid. He's just making one stupid move after another, and I'm tired of it.
Well, Iran is.
I'm glad I didn't vote for him.
Iran
my time.
Iran is in a difficult situation, right, Harry? Where they can't provoke a response that pulls them into a war. Their strategy has been simple over the past few years. They get attacked by Israel. They do a response. It could be any kind of response. It's just a response. They don't want to get pulled into a war on their enemy's terms, right? They want to, if they're going to engage in a war, I don't think they're a weak country by any means. They just don't want to be pulled into a war on their adversary's terms. It's just smart statecraft there. Why would you want to do what your enemy wants you to do, right? Because they clearly have things planned out. If you were to do things that were to pull you into a war, they have X, Y, and Z. They're going to target all these different things that will trigger statewide collapse. So they know that Israel likely has identified critical areas within their state that would trigger collapse, including the targeting of the Ayatollahs, right? So why would you just play into their hands? So as much as many of us want a larger response, a much more bigger escalation in the conflict, that's exactly what Israel wants too. So we have to kind of to be a bit smarter about how we manage the situation, because yes, it does warrant a response, but you have to be smart and say like, okay, well, what is my end goal here? I'm gonna throw the kitchen sink at them, and then I'll probably be defenseless. I'm going to invite a huge attack involving American personnel as well, right? I'm going to obliterate every kind of advancement I've made, or meaning the state has made in past 10 years, 20 years maybe. Yeah. They'll probably send you back 20 years in with the amount of damage they do. So just basically look at what's happened in Iraq and other places across the world. So much of their countries have been decimated through war, right? So Iran is not a new nation when it comes to these type of things. They're historic, one of the OGs of nation building, all the way back to the original Persian empires from a couple thousand years ago and stuff. So they are one of the great powers that has historically outlived these type of situations, and you have to be careful when you do this so that you don't destroy yourself in the process of protecting your honor.
Yeah,
right?
and I think outliving is a very important word, because think about how much Israel's trying to bring them into like an all-out war. Imagine like having like the Mossad and having attacks concocted within your own country from Israel, which is what kind of started a lot of this, right? And people were like, oh my God, people, they're like, Israel's attacking them from within their own country. They're like in these hidden locations, and they're like, man, this would be complete like all out war. But then they just took it kind of. It seemed like they took it pretty easy, which was I was thinking in my mind was like, man, how come they're not retaliating much harder because Israel's working from within their own country, and then attacking all of their nuclear scientists, like the precision of all their major nuclear scientists, and then their generals. And I was like, man, how come the response is so weak?
Yeah.
And then you start thinking as a civilian, you're just like, oh man, if that was me, I would get revenge. But it seems like they're trying to be very, very calculated, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think the more on the terms of Israel being pulled into a war, it seems like them not going into an all-out war is hurting Israel and America, because they're waiting for something bigger to happen. It's not happening. Maybe it's just me. I don't know, my naiveness, but it kind of seems
Definitely hurting Israel.
Right?
It's hurting Israel not getting, because Bibi Netanyahu needs to keep this war going. He needs to expand the war to stay in power.
And he's a hero now. Everybody forgot about his lack of activity on October 7th, and now since he's launching these attacks, he's everything's overturned now, and now he's like this hero. But now it's like, okay, this retaliation's not happening the way we wanted it to happen. So you never know, man. I think things are escalating rather quickly. Me and Sam were just listening to some live reporting of the South Pars gas fields that were one of the largest in the world, were attacked by Israel. Humongous fire going on there right now. And it happens to be that the northern region of the Pars is where where Qatar and the Middle East, rest of the Middle East, gets gas from, and the southern, which was attacked, is only limited to the domestic gas supply. So they're obviously doing it very strategically, because if they were to hit the other parts, rest of the Middle East would be affected by it. But Israel hasn't done that. But it seems like they're just inching more and more towards bringing something very all out, and it hasn't happened yet. And people are just kind of wondering, like, okay, well, how come there's no retaliation? But I think what you said makes sense. Is outliving some of these attacks is kind of smart. The other thing I think that was really cool, the conversation we were having before we started rolling, was the question that people have: is this Israel's war or is America's war? Right? This attack, is this America's attack or is Israel's attack? And I know it seems like splitting hairs, but I think that's a very interesting conversation, because that's what everybody is confused about. Right? Is this actually Israel going rogue and doing what they want to do, or is America using Israel to get Iran to bend the knee, because they're the only power in the region that hasn't bended the knee yet? Everyone else has fallen suit, and Iran's the only one who hasn't fallen suit yet. So we have to try to bring them to their knee. Why not use Israel, right? What do you guys think about that?
I think that was true in the beginning, that we were using Israel as our attack dog. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, very, very, very true. That we were using them, propping them up in the Middle East as part of divide and conquer strategy. But something changed. I would say it really started changing around the time of Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter was the first person to identify this. Not the first person to identify. Oh, that's silly. Really more around JFK, Jimmy Carter. JFK in particular, trying to stop them from getting nuclear weapons, and saying, no, you can't have this, and no, you can't do that, and no, you can't do this. And then clearly the CIA and Mossad were involved in his assassination some way, somehow. Starting with JFK, and then the Jimmy Carter trying to, broker a peace deal, and then calling out the Israelis for their behavior and saying how much they have an influence over us. And then you see it in George Bush, even. George Bush Sr. said, we'll sever the relationship if you go too far. And then Clinton gets elected. The lobby decided to throw their weight behind Clinton. So it's not that we didn't support them in the beginning. We did. But see, it's the proxy has now become the master.
Yeah.
It would be like if we were supporting Ukraine all this time, and over time Ukraine slowly sinks its claws and controls our policy in the same way. So that's not how it started. but now that's how it's going. And so I sympathize with Trump a little bit in that, nobody wants to get shot on live TV
Yeah.
in front of the whole country. I kind of get that. But, if you don't want to possibly get shot, maybe don't be president. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Israel clearly has.
We don't know at this point, but we're not.
They've clearly they're forcing America's hands, and they've identified that they have enough influence in American politics, in American just institutions all across the country. They have enough sway to get what they want, and by effectively hijacking or derailing the negotiations that are happening with the United States and Iran, they've kind of cleared this way, or forcing Trump to make to appease them and eventually pull the United States into war.
Yeah, no, that's internally too, but I think externally, a lot of times people forget is how much intelligence and how much America needs Israel to exist in the middle of the Middle East, right?
Yeah,
like them being there and giving so much intelligence 100%. To America. That is such an upper hand that no one else is going to be doing that for America. Like if you think about America in the middle of Middle East is Israel.
Yeah. And
America needs it. And it's so funny. Like I hear a lot of these guys, like Tucker Carlson, a lot of these guys are on the bandwagon. Why does America keep going to war? Why can't we just mind our own business? Let's keep it America first. We got to stay out of wars. But either they're really naive or they're playing something where America, any entity that needs to be a superpower needs to sink its talons everywhere in the world. It's stupid to say, oh, America just needs to mind its own. But look, I don't agree with what America is doing.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go with the understanding that America needs to maintain being a superpower, it needs to have its talons everywhere.
Yeah.
And it has to be involved in all conflicts.
Right.
It's stupid to say that America, no, we just need to mind our own business, but we still want to remain the superpower. No, it's not going to happen. That's not how the world
100%.
works. That's not how the world works.
And one of the things that they've identified with many of the countries all across the world is who are historical powers.
Exactly.
Right? Historical powers meaning who will have from time-tested powers. China, Japan, Iran, the Ottomans, Turkey, Russia, the UK. These are effectively powers that have lasted the test of time. They're not Czechoslovakias. Right, they're not Yugoslovakias. They're countries that have been together and they won't be fractured. Right, so you want to make sure that these countries are your lackeys. You want to have, at least in the global hegemony type of foreign policy that America for decades has been kind of trying to sink its talons into, that you've just mentioned. They want to make sure that Iran bends a knee. All these other countries in the Gulf are effectively lackeys, including Turkey. They're all just players in the game. You'll hear them bark about Israel and stuff, but that's just for theater.
Yeah.
That's a theater. They're all in it. They all worship the same god, money, and they want Iran to do the same. They want Iran to be the same type of country that does their bidding, that will put American and / Israeli interests first before their own, and that's what they don't have yet, and they want that.
And that's why I said that. Like a lot of people think that Israel is a thorn in the side of America. I think it's more Iran than Israel, right? Yeah, Israel can do a lot of the work that it needs to do, and it does it much. It delivers a nicer bite from the Middle East, but the fact that Iran isn't following suit to the hegemony has to be. Like, dude, we got to make them bend really hard. I mean, that's just the way I'm thinking about it. But it just baffles me that people think that because you have many people like trying to say America first, we have to get out of these wars, we have to get out of these countries. I mean, people can say whatever they want; they have freedom of speech. But why would a superpower listen to those voices when they're thinking all these people they have no idea what it is to be a superpower and what work it takes to be a superpower, and we have to be involved everywhere. We have to monitor everything that's happening, or else we're going to lose our power.
Yeah.
Right?
I
It's
think that
almost
was true
naive.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think 20 years ago, what you were saying would have been true, even just 10 years ago. But the situation has changed over the last decade substantially because now, I'm on my microphone a little bit closer here. Now, we produce most of our own oil. Like we're one of the top major oil producers. And we Israel now is like a strategic liability. That's part of the reason why you see the breakdown between relations slowly but surely happening over the last 10 years, or really over the last 3, 4 years. It's because Israel is not just something that we have to deal with, but we not the juice just isn't really worth the squeeze. And you say, well, we get all this intel from them. Okay, but half of that intel ends up being fake or false flags or something that the Israelis are grossly going to exaggerate to get us to do their bidding for them.
Yeah.
So how valuable of an asset is that to us?
But Harry,
It's
look,
not really that valuable.
but Harry, check this out. I think obviously you mentioned oil. That's just an example. I think that's just a part of the equation, right? Now, if you look, if the way I'm thinking about this, just like from a bird's eye view, yes, you have oil, which is a significant part of it. America produces on oil, but I don't think it's just about oil and money. It's about knowing what's happening and keeping tabs on everything that's happening, so you know what next moves can be all over the world, right? And I think
That's true, but we don't need Israel for that.
I mean,
In
I don't
fact,
know,
Israel,
but why does America
Israel
give
gives
so
us
much?
information that's wrong.
It gives information that may be wrong, but I think the information that it gives, which is accurate, is very important to America, right? It's like let's say out of 100 pieces of information, the 50 pieces they give is enough for America to continue its to leverage its power over the rest of the Middle East, right? Because even though there's false information that's given, why is America still willing to invest so much into Israel? And Israel has a free reign because the amount of information I think that they get from Israel and the technology, the best technology that America has is given to Israel, even sometimes in testing. I know that was true 10 years ago, and I think it still exists today. But why is such a quote unquote weak country so powerful in the Middle East? It's because of Big Brother, right?
Well, the reason they have so much influence over us is because of what Epstein did in the lobby. That's why they have all this ability to keep us going in this game, even though we don't want to. I
But
think
then
there's
it
a
takes
lot of
someone like Cash
signs that
Patel to be like, oh, actually, we have everything, that's it, and to just give something doctored,
because
whatever
he's
they want.
afraid. He's
No, no, of
afraid.
course.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like they've got us kind of by the cojones here. That's our deep state I want to clarify one thing here that drives me nuts here is that so many people say that the Israeli lobby and the American deep state are the exact same thing, and they're not.
They're not.
There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of sympathy between the two, but there's also a lot of clashing between the two. It's like saying that, I don't know, what's a good example? It's like saying that, Hitler and Stalin were BFFs for life because they signed a treaty back in the Dizay before the war started. Like, okay, yeah, they're friends for now, but that doesn't mean that they're always going to be friends. And all the examples I gave you of presidents like George Bush Sr. trying to disentangle or threatening to disentangle that relationship shows you at the end of the day, they're not the same thing. And from the point of the deep state, and you have people like Peter Zion and people like Peter Zion, just like Professor Morandi over in Iran, they're not necessarily the voices of the establishment based on their professorial and special connections in the groups that they're in. Um, that's a pretty good window into what their respective political establishments are thinking. So when Peter Zion says that the United States is slowly disentangling itself from the region and that the special relationship with Israel is dying, I take that seriously.
Hmm.
I don't think he's just saying that for wishful thinking. I think that he really means that. I think he really is saying that. And he's not the only voice saying that. And then you see all these, JD Vance, Trump coming out giving these sort of like measured responses that aren't as warm. And you saw Trump's trip to the Gulf where he intentionally ignored Israel. And then you see how he's allowed the Houthis to continue attacking them unabated. Don't be surprised if Donald Trump, we have a similar repeat with Iran, where some of our assets in the Middle East get hit, and that's how we pull it too. We're the Gulf states are far more valuable to us than Israel. I mean, they just are. I mean, between the petrodollar, we'll just say agreement because it's not a it's not a proper formalized alliance. That's a common misconception. We'll say between the petrodollar, between all the oil that they get, all the bases that they let us keep there, the fact that we defend them. I mean, the relationship that we have with the Gulf is much more mutually beneficial,
Hmm.
and it's much more important to the United States interests long term than Israel. Israel has gone from being, you know, it's this is where I agree with Shahid Bolson. It's like we're not in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s anymore. The game has changed. And just as you said, Israel has strategic patience. I would agree with Shahid Bolson that the Gulf states have a very valid reason not to just go run and charge into Israel, which is a nuclear armed porcupine as well. So everybody's kind of like looking at this situation and trying to slowly disentangle from it. The
Hmm.
problem is Trump, in my opinion, failed. And he continues to make this mistake where he allows the wrong people around him, and he tries to play both sides of the fence, and he's not doing enough to just cut Israel off, just cut BBF. Past presidents, Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., they all picked up the phone and said, "Hey, knock it off, Israel," and Israel did.
You know,
And Trump, he's in his second term, he could do it, and he's not. So it's on him.
so the word deep state came into the political arena probably like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and now has just been a lot more prevalent in political analyses in the media in the past 2 years. And like you're talking about, disentangling things. People are still trying to figure out little by little, getting more and more information. But if you were to inform or just shed light on who actually is the deep state, I know that was original confusion in the beginning, and little by little, as events unfold, people are figuring out more and more about who this deep state is, right? And I know it's just kind of it's a difficult question probably, but like how do we actually define the deep state? How do we inform people what the deep state actually is?
That's a great question. I mean, the way I would define the deep state is I wouldn't call it a group, actually. I would call it more of a phenomenon, kind of like hurricane season. It's kind of like how, people in Texas, whenever there's a tornado, all the Midwestern North Texas dads get out of their mobile homes with a beer and just like, all right, look at this tornado here. You know, the deep state is kind of like that. The deep state is it's just it's just a natural phenomenon that happens when you have agency capture of entire agencies and departments by special interests and permanently unelected bureaucratic officials.
But it has
People
to
in
be
the
made up of some
CIA.
people. There has to be some people, right? Like that we can point to that are involved in what we refer to this phenomenon. But that phenomenon is
Oh
pushed
yeah,
and answered to by.
It's well
it,
entrenched people who who are deeply powerful or are representing deeply powerful people, and they have sometimes competing interests. It's not all like the deep state is like
right.
one vision. We're going straight.
Exactly.
It's all different competing interests, and they want the United States to head towards their vision of what will benefit them.
So we can say like in the past we
Exactly.
used to say that capitalism, like America, is run by corporations.
Yeah.
So it has to be major corporations. Some of the big
There's gonna be
players,
some, yeah.
major
Some
heads
of
of
them.
corporations, right? Some of them has to be major heads of
Yeah,
corporations.
but you'll see like America clamp down on other corporations or the EU and stuff like that. That you would think, oh, they wouldn't they be part of the deep state, but they're not. So
Right.
there's different sectors of the American economy or corporations that are being represented in the deep state, but not others.
But what about names, bro? I've been looking for like who are some names that are involved in the deep state?
Well, it's going to be like
Fauci.
Fauci's, yeah, he's going to be there in terms of at least the healthcare world, right? But in terms of you want to look at like banking heads, right? Heads of banks, Berkshire Hathaway, what's his name, Warren Buffett, and they're going to have their representatives in Washington. You're going to have people that's just old money, right? The old wealth that came from not just couple decades, but from generational wealth, from hundreds, over 100 years at least, from Standard Oil days. So there's going to be a lot of different individuals, but they're not sitting in an office in Washington. Is what I'm trying to say. They're going to be represented by different power players. They're going to be represented by congressmen, lobbyists, and stuff like that. People who are deeply connected in, just like Harry said, unelected positions within government.
Yeah.
That they're just people who know how to pull strings together.
I think it's important to make that differentiation, because some people, when they hear about deep state, they think of like the skulls, or they think of like Freemasons that are
There
sitting.
may be some of those too.
No, there may be.
Interdimensional reptilian or aliens.
No, how I actually think of it is like there's a bunch of people, different people from different industries that are very, very wealthy, like you said, and they have their interests. And when their interest is kind of being infringed upon, or they don't like something, they voice it to whoever they need to be like, hey, this has got to change, right? And that's where I think you have multiple people that are involved. Like the deep state is just a concept, like he was saying, a phenomenon, but you have a whole bunch of different people from different sectors that run a lot of the money in the world, basically. And we know kind of what professions they come from, but we don't know all of them involved, but not all of them have the same line of thinking
We
either.
do know they all worship money. They're all ideologically united on power and money, right? So they're going to converge on this agreement, and they're going to do what. Why I feel like, well, I'm for American pullout and America, the first American first, the bullet points of that movement. I just feel like the deep state is acting against them, and they're so well entrenched in the state that it's going to take a long time before these people are pushed out, and it's going to have to be a radical shift in the, not just in the powerful people in the country, but among Americans itself, that this consumerist, super, all the horrible things that are related to me first, and the capitalist mindset of benefiting yourself and overindulgence and stuff like that. It requires the people to change. You got to have, you got to be able to be willing to pay a little bit more for something that, for the sake of the betterment of the world. You want to be like, okay, fine, I'll pay a couple dollars more for gas or whatever. I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying that we're with that example, but whatever it is, you're gonna have to make sacrifices so that you pay a little bit more for that. And there's also going to have to be a shift in how even they treat themselves. Like the gap between the rich and the poor is just keep expanding, and the people up top are funding people down below to say that you're not poor. You just got to pull yourself up by the bootstrap and figure it out. And there's some great things that the Trump administration is doing too. Like Kash Patel was talking about how they're clamping down on the fentanyl trade and stuff like that, and how those are great things. But that's just not enough. Those are things that are making the headlines. But what is the problem is a fundamental problem where the disparity of wealth is just incredible now. You're not having a middle class anymore. You're just going to have the wealthy and a very slim middle class, and then the rest will be poor. And that's where the country's headed. And how do you shift that is the main question.
So
I would push back on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shake, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you good, Bismillah.
Okay, I'm just fine. No, I would push back on that just a little bit, and that I would say there is a third path between clearing out the deep state and keeping the deep state in. There is a third path, which is persuading the deep state, or the deep state slowly but surely realizing that such and such a path is not sustainable and not in their long-term interest. And I think that we're starting to see that now with Israel in particular, like I said, with Peter Zeihan, where the deep state, the establishment, whatever you wish to call it, is realizing that Israel has become a strategic liability.
Yeah.
That's just one example of several. And, there's a lot of very well established, you watch a lot of TED Talks about something like universal basic income and automation and robotics. There's a lot of very wealthy, established people in the establishment, deep state, whatever, that recognize we're about to have mass unemployment and we're going to have to do something special about that.
I mean,
So I'm not a big fan of the deep state, but it doesn't. You don't necessarily have to get rid of all of them in order to enact change.
yeah, but I mean, here we gotta have like when you see a company like Palantir, it's all over the news, and Israel, I understand they're far away for people, and to visualize them as a problem can be difficult for the average American. But Palantir's right here, and they're expanding surveillance on everyday Americans, and the idea that Americans are just going to allow this to happen. Forget about going to, they're allowing it to happen. That all their information, every movement, every activity of theirs is going to be tracked by this all-seeing eye. That's got to terrify people. And nobody, I mean, yeah, there's a few people on Twitter who are making it, trying to bring awareness around it, but the America of 30 years ago would never have allowed a company like this to take and hold in this country. It just signals that there's a lot of complacency, a lot of people being just sidetracked by everyday life, whatever.
And a majority of people never understand the depth of Palantir, and they know that. Like, it's only going to be maybe like point whatever percent
Yeah.
of people that actually know about what's happening. Majority of the people don't care.
Right.
They're very busy with other things. They want to raise their kids. They're trying to make money. They're trying to, and a lot of them, the only news, like if they do, like a big portion of the United States is just like watching
Yeah.
Fox News and CNN and C-SPAN, and they see these arguments that are happening, and they think that this is something huge. It's going to bring a huge change when they're grilling. This Howley guy is grilling somebody,
Yeah.
and they think that this is politics and America's really moving forward. But in reality, that's so insignificant.
Yeah.
I have a deeply unpopular opinion about Palantir.
What's up?
Oh, don't.
I'm not a fan of Palantir. I just don't think it really matters that much because they're already doing it. I've already come to live my life over the last few years, especially as if I don't want the government or the machine to know what I'm doing, I just don't do it online.
No, that's true.
I mean, that's
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Your phone at home.
Harry, I agree with you.
But isn't that, Harry, that same mentality, like, oh, I have nothing to hide, But that's not how, we think about or frame these type of situations,
No, I'll tell you why. Because even if there was no NSA, even if there was no Palantir, and it was just all between you and Google and Alphabet Soup or whatever, the government at any time could get any type of warrant or subpoena to basically pull out your metadata.
Yeah.
So it's already here. So that's why I say if you don't, you really can't stop it. There's really limitations. And even if there was no NSA, even if there was no Patriot Act, that the government is going to put employees inside of an agency like Google. And
Right.
so this is why I'm not saying that, oh, whatever, I have nothing to hide. What I'm saying is, if you don't want to be seen, don't be online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's ways to do that to mitigate what they can see about you. But that's really about it. And if you're not willing to do that, well, I don't know what to tell you. The other thing that, because they're already doing. There's already programs like Palantir. They've already got files on a lot of people. And
what's happening, Harry? One of the things that WikiLeaks just released was Bank of America in 2010 was targeting WikiLeaks using Palantir as their main source of intel, where they're having targeted attacks towards organizations based on the intelligence they're collecting against them. So these type of companies become deeply problematic when it comes to trying to bring change in a country that has that you're effectively trying to change its course and trying to have have its talents out of the different areas of the world where you're trying to get it to focus on internal problems, a country like Palantir will be used against us.
I'm not saying that Palantir won't be used against us. I'm saying it's already here. So everybody's freaking out about Palantir, but it's already happening. People have already been debanked. People are already getting pulled off of flights. People are already getting judged with pre-crime. This is already here. I've had some of that happen to be myself, although not as extreme as somebody like Nick Fuentes, for example, or Alex Jones. Lawfare is already a thing. We saw what happened to Alex Jones. We see what's happening to Andrew Tate. So it's not that this isn't terrible. It's not that I don't care. But what I am saying is that this is not new. This is already happening. Everybody in this group chat right now, they've got a file on us, especially me.
No, and I think people have been talking about data and metadata for a long time, ever since especially Edward Snowden's revelations. But I think the dilemma also here is everybody wants technology to advance, and this is what advancing technology is. It's a lot of technology has to do with surveillance. And the more technology advances, this is what it's going to. This is the double-edged sword of technology and how it ends up destroying itself. Also, right? I think we're witnessing the beginnings of a slow implosion of technology, because it's so rapidly advancing. And part of technology advancing is that it has to infringe on your privacy. It has to do with data. Like a majority of technology, the next wave of technology advancing, it has to have data. And it has to have data on every move that human beings do, obviously from the advent of the smartphone and obviously through AI and all these advancements. The next step was almost a decade ago is gathering data and big data on everybody. Right? Now, what it's doing with that data is the next step, obviously, of technology. And that's why we have people talking about Palantir. But it's already like almost like a decade late because it's already been paved. I think what Harry's saying is that the way has been paved in the past decade for all of this to come to the point where
there's other companies already doing what Palantir has done. Maybe not.
And this is what it means. This is what it looks like. A technology, when the internet was first released to the public, it was really cool. It was awesome for research and all that, but it wasn't going to stop there. It has to advance, right? And then you had social media, and then you have, cloud technology, and then you have big data. And this is what it looks like when you have lots and lots of technology. It has to infringe everywhere.
Yeah. Well,
but it also infringes in the other direction too. So we also know a lot more about what's going on with the deep states. So,
yes, sir.
So just because they know all this stuff about us doesn't mean we don't know stuff about them. And so Ray Kurzweil has the futurist Ray Kurzweil has that great quote: "Things aren't necessarily getting worse, but our information's definitely getting better."
Yeah,
and that's really true. Our information is getting better, and we see things as they really are now. And it gets harder and harder for them to get away. Just as it gets harder and harder for us to get away with stuff, it gets harder and harder for them to get away with stuff. And that's part of the reason why the war machine's coming slowly grinding down. It's why the relationship with Israel is breaking down slowly but surely, inshallah. It's why this whole, Palantir or no Palantir, it's why a lot of illegal immigrants are going to go away one way or the other. A lot of these illegal immigrants are going to get deported with or without Palantir because AI and automation is going to make them useless. If there's no jobs for people to do, do you really need 40 million people here illegally to make the beds every morning?
Harry, we're way off the conversation right now. We're talking about Iran and
beautiful.
Sheikh got us onto the
Sorry,
deep state.
Guys. Sorry.
Well, is this
he loves investigating the deep state. He's got a chart in his bedroom identifying deep state players, and he's got that yarn that's connecting
like
people.
A beautiful mind. A beautiful mind.
You go into his garage, you'll just find different people all over.
Russell Crowe in the deep mind. It's a beautiful mind.
Beautiful mind.
Yeah, but yeah, regardless.
So what's your guys' thoughts on was Trump just delaying this tactic? What many social media commentators like Glenn Greenwald and others are saying that this whole theater between Trump and Netanyahu having a disagreement or them being far from each other was that theater, or that, because they're saying that it was just like they were, that effectively they're both working in concert, and America had, was just kind of buying time for Israel to carry out these strikes.
There's two ways to look at that. The first is that Bibi Netanyahu went over Trump's head and is trying to drag us into a war, which I think is mostly true. And then there's another way to look at it, which is that Bibi Netanyahu has a lot of power and is dragging Trump's chain. He's dragging him around by the neck, and Trump and the Trump administration and the Pentagon are coming up with solutions to say, well, if we're going to get dragged around here and into this mess, what's the most effective way to support them without getting too involved? And and then the way to give the most maximum amount of plausible deniability in this, if we're going to get dragged around anyways. And so that's why you see things like Trump, on one hand, seriously telling Bibi Netanyahu, don't do this, and on the other hand, they're giving them missiles. And to be fair to the Joe Biden administration, I think Joe Biden administration was dealing with something similar. And nobody wants to get whacked, so they go along for now. But this is the last administration that's really going to be able to support Israel publicly like this, or doing half measures like this. The next administration's not going to be able to do that, especially if it's a Democratic liberal administration. They won't have support from their base to do it. It's not going to end overnight, but it is going to end.
But I mean, I think something substantial has to happen for that to end. Like, for instance, any foreign entity having involvement with U.S. politicians, like AIPAC. Like, can you see within even the next few administrations of America withering away with AIPAC? Like, that's something actually that would be a substantial move, I think, to prove any foreign entity has involvement in American politics, right?
I think that what's going to end this kerfuffle with Iran is Iran taking out a few of our bases or ships, and we're going to cry uncle just like we did with Yemen. And Trump will probably say something like, well, we smashed a bunch of their bases and their airfields, but they smashed our ships. But you know what? We got their airfields, so we're going to declare the victory and go home.
Man, I have a really hard... Again, it's probably from my naiveness. You guys are much more well aware, but I can't imagine Iran hitting some type of American base in a substantial manner. Like, I can't... For some reason, I can't picture that happening. Do you guys... And I'm being honest. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate. Do you really think that's possible?
So long as we don't support Israel too strongly, too directly, I think you're probably right. But if we keep escalating and if we keep giving them stuff, eventually they will. I think more than likely they're going to look at this like, okay, well, if you're doing this to Russia with Ukraine, Russia eventually won, is eventually winning, and is still gaining steam. So, okay, you want to do this for 3 years with Ukraine and Russia? We'll do this for 3 years with Israel.
And since you mentioned Russia and China, like, obviously Russia voiced a little bit of its opinion, but how come we don't see, maybe it's for damage control, but how come we don't see Russia getting too involved? China obviously had some words to say, but nothing. Can you see in the foreseeable future that Russia and China kind of openly say, hey, we're going to support Iran? Because that's really bad news then if they do that openly, right?
No, I mean, what does Russia have to lose? I mean, if Russia Russia already basically openly supports Iran. I don't know if they have a full-on treaty yet. Maybe they do, but it could come to that.
The old Russia would have done that. The old Russia was from the 60s and 70s, would have had its back. Now it's become a much more different type of relationship where it's more based on like situations or just on economic benefit or mutual benefit for a certain situation. But when you look at it right now, um, there is no way out for countries like Iran, Russia, and China unless they work together. They have to form a bloc, but similar to how the United States and Israel and the United Kingdom and other countries kind of have formed a form of a treaty. There's no other way out for these countries, especially China, Russia, and Iran, to have any form of any kind of independence or dignity as a nation if they don't work together. Like they have to have their own NATO-style government. What do you feel about that?
Prince Harry.
Yeah, I don't. Prince Harry.
Sorry, I had to say
Prince
it.
Harry just walk around with like, well, it's better than Harry Balls or Harry and the Hendersons. You know. If I ever make it rich with the oil money or something and move to Dubai, that's going to be my vanity license plate. Harry Balls, just drive around my Lambo Urus all day, trying to hit on old chicks that are widowed. That's right.
Well, this really went off the rails, dude.
just go full Barry Lyndon mode and start marrying like multiple older women that are widows and divorcees of all that oil baron money. Just ruin Dubai and Dubai's
He's still going, bro. He's still digging.
I'm still digging, man. It's still a fantasy of mine to one day go full Barry Lyndon mode on Dubai, but you know it's never going to happen. Who am I kidding? Yeah, no, I think that Russia, like I said, Russia doesn't have a whole lot to lose. They were already giving Iran all kinds of technology, like the S-400 air defense systems, which may or may not be working right now. That's debatable. But one thing is for sure, like, Russia cannot afford to lose Iran. Russia could afford to lose Syria because, Syria, the last few years before HTS and Jolani took over, Russia was trying to patch things up between the different factions. And they were trying to say, look, Assad, you've got to make some reforms here. You can patch things up with these different groups. And Russia was hosting all these meetings, kind of like how we were trying to like get Iraqis together and hold the thing in Iraq together. They were doing that in Syria. That was their hearts and minds. That was their reconciliation between groups. Hey guys, how are you going to work together? How can we keep this thing going? And it didn't work. They got frustrated with Assad. They got tired of Assad. So you could make an argument that part of the conspiracy theory against Assad was not just NATO paying off Assad's top generals. It was also Russia kind of going along. All right, come on, bro. You got to come home. You got to sit this one out. It's like a coach who says, you're screwing this game up. We can't let you. You're gonna go sit on the bench for a while and go figure yourself out. And that's exactly what happened. Where's Assad now? Now he's deep within St. Petersburg doing cocaine and hanging out with hookers, depressed because his wife left him, whole 9 yards, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. But they didn't abandon him. They didn't abandon him. So, and Syria is not nearly as important as Iran to the big Russian chessboard from the Russian perspective. So if they didn't abandon Assad, why would they abandon Iran? They have if Iran gets taken out, that means that's a huge vacuum for the United States and NATO and Israel to march through the Middle East. More so than Syria, way more so than Syria. In fact, from the Russia perspective and from the Iranian perspective, Jolani taking power actually isn't that much of a loss because now the situation in Syria is open to chaos. Jolani's got a new government. There's still all these factions that don't like each other. At any second, things could, fall apart again. We hope they don't, but that's a possibility. In Iran and Russia could come right back into that mess and create Israel thinks that they're marching right into success and victory. They might not.
What do you mean that he's
marching
sick?
into a big quagmire.
Sorry for the distraction, squirrel. But what do you mean he's sick? Is he like?
What do you mean? He's like
Is he having some health issues?
about who? Jelani?
Yeah, you said Jolani's sick, or did you mean like figuratively?
No, I
You
don't
said
think
he's
I said
sick.
sick.
Oh,
What I said is Jelani is, thinks that people can think that Jelani's like secured everything and
ah,
everything's good, and that alhamdulillah, we're moving on. But the reality is that situation in Syria is extremely fragile,
mm,
and
yeah.
they've already come across munition stubs. That's just the ones they're catching. Weapon shipments, Iran, possibly Russia, are already sending weapons and equipment back into Syria. This could be a prolonged restart of the civil war and all kinds of fifth generational conflict in Syria for another decade off and on. So, that's what I'm saying. That is not necessarily a loss because Assad, just like Israel was starting to become a liability for the U.S., Assad was starting to become a liability for the Russians. That's why they didn't go in there and back him up. And this big mess that's there now is like, okay, well, Israel wants to expand their borders. They want to move their tanks closer and closer to Damascus. NATO wants to mess around. Okay, come on in, come on in, come on in. And that's very common that's what the Iranians have done for centuries. They're very cloak and dagger like that. They don't always like, we got to hold the line. No, that's not at all the Iranian way. A lot of times it's like,
how does
come
how,
play with us.
how does Iran respond if Israel successfully kills their supreme leader Ali Khamenei? How does
I think that's the real test.
that is what will truly pull them into war, I think.
And I think Israel.
Kill new Khomeini? I don't know. How's that work?
I think if Iran doesn't bite back, then I think Israel probably does that. And if that does, then I think it's all out war. I think they have to because the people are not going to sit still either.
Yeah, because
But Iran already did respond, didn't they? I mean, they responded pretty brutally. They took out Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon this last 20.
yeah, no, that's fine. But in terms of pulling them into a real war, right? Because that's what Israel wants. Israel wants to find a target, find something that can really bring the entire wrath of Iran onto them, but have America bail them out, obviously. America, Saudi Arabia, regional Arab lackeys come in and say, hey, you know what, we're going to make sure.
Iran.
Yeah, they literally, even just recently, just in the recent salvo that Iran fired on Israel, the regional Gulf countries did their best to protect Israel from getting hit by these missiles. So how do they get Iran to bite with like their full bite? And that's what they're trying to figure out. How do we get them to really engage in a war? And I think this is by them targeting Ali Khamenei, maybe the thing that would pull them into a war.
What about the rumblings? I don't know how accurate.
You don't think so?
No, Khamenei. I was just saying Khamenei.
Hamani? Ad Hamani?
Yeah,
Ad
Khamenei.
hominem?
What about like
I
the
don't know.
friction?
Maybe. I think they could just replace him. When what was his face?
Nasrallah?
The general. No, the
Oh.
general that we back after we
Soleimani?
invaded ISIS.
Soleimani?
Soleimani. Soleimani got taken out, and then we basically pulled out of one base or withdrew some troops out of a base and let the Iranians have a symbolic slap us in the face symbolically on one of our bases. And then there was a big national day of mourning for a week or whatever, and life went on. I think getting rid of Khamenei would be a huge blow. There would be a response, a big response, but it might not be an all-out war. And then I don't know how the whole Shia replacement thing is. It like the Pope? Is there like some smoke? Does that bloomin' onion thing on their flag turn a different
Blood.
color?
Blood.
You gotta have some.
How does that work?
Well, hopefully the smoke involves smoke coming in Tel Aviv You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
it definitely would involve smoke coming in Tel Aviv, but that doesn't mean that it would be the a full-on war.
I think
I
it
mean,
requires to understand dynamics too, like because sometimes people say, and I don't know how true this is, about like that constant struggle between the prime minister and the Khamenei, and how they actually don't like each other, and they could actually do away with it. Like, who knows if Iran even has their own deep state? They wouldn't mind if.
No, I think here's what I think. I think they're ideological. I don't think they will bite and pull themselves into a war, even if they take out Khamenei. They could take out anyone. Israel can take out anyone. I think they'll find a replacement, just like they've done with Hezbollah. Nasrallah was killed, and effectively, Hezbollah is still there. They're just regrouping or
Yeah.
licking their wounds, I guess. And they're going to. I think Iran first and foremost has to figure out where the leaks are. Okay, if I was in charge of their country, I would say we're going to do a strategic overhaul of how intelligence is leaking to the Mossad, and figure out where these leaks are. Once you do this assessment, you figure out how you're going to proceed from there. How you're going to respond to any kind of attacks from Israel. You also then build some kind of non-deterrence agreement with partners like Russia, China. You may have to volunteer forces to Russia to fight in Ukraine.
Yeah.
You may have to do that in order for that kind of a treaty to take hold. But that also pulls you into like a wider world war type of a conflict as well. But if you want the Russians to come to your aid, or China to come to your aid, you have to sacrifice your own soldiers
You have
too.
to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
Because you don't want, for Russia, I can definitely see like Iran being a liability on them. It's like, because what is Russia actually bringing to the table in a substantial manner, the way Israel brings to America, right?
Yeah.
It's not that substantial, to be honest with you.
Yeah. They're going, at least Iran's perspective is that if they're going to get us, they're going to have to come and invade. We're not going to go out. That's where the battleground is, on their turf. Yeah, it'll involve a lot of damage on their infrastructure and on their civilians and etc. But the pockets of the Israelis and Americans and anyone else involved in that conflict will be the ones that will be hurt most, and countless of American lives will be involved in a conflict with Iran. Iran is not the same as Iraq. It
No,
is a
definitely
much
not.
more trained, skilled fighters within that country than within Iraq. And
It's
they're
mountains too.
mountains.
That's why Yemen is the same thing. It's like people are like, oh, well, the United States Navy has all this firepower, but there's no navy on the face of the earth that can defeat mountains.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, people just don't understand logistics here, but it's like it doesn't matter. It's like saying that I have the fastest, most powerful race car, therefore I can use it to smash a building.
Yeah.
You know, like
analogy,
it's
yeah.
just not going to work. You know,
No hypersonic missile is going to blow up a mountain.
no, there's not a single muscle on Earth. Even if you nuke a mountain, there's a substantial chance that most of it would remain.
Yeah.
So,
Is
like,
it?
what are what are you doing trying to what are you doing thinking you're going to take on a bunch of mountains with your navy? It's just not going to happen. So, like, I mean, Iran would be that times 1,000, and I think that's why Trump is saying, the Trump administration or the Trump himself is like, well, if I'm going to get dragged into this, I'm at least going to get dragged into this the bare minimum amount to give the United States plausible deniability, and that may be part of the backdoor dealings with Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu, you son of a gun, don't you dare do this. But if you're going to do this, you better at least not, drag us in directly. We better have some plausible deniability, and I think that's what happened. But I still, in my opinion, I still stand by what I said, and I know with respect to Sheikh bin Hamid and some of your other guests and some of the other people talked to on other shows didn't like this. I'm not voting for Trump. I'm glad I didn't vote for Trump. Trump failed. He could have stopped the situation. He could have. And this is just unnecessary. And it was frustrating to me at like a deep personal level. It's like, dude, this is your last term. You can tell everybody to go to hell, and you're not doing it. And then he's not really deporting. He's not mass deporting illegals. He's like constantly chickening and waffling. Oh, actually, we're going to let people who work on farms and hotels. Oh, actually, that's just like from an America First perspective. It's just like, you see a lot of commentators on X that are just like, dude, are you actually going to do what you said you were going to do or what?
Yeah.
It's your second term.
This is and remember here I was saying exactly what you're saying, that he's going to continue most of the things that Biden was doing anyway. There's going to be a few things that on the surface level that some of the ICE detention, some of the things that the hawkish, the Israel loving people will love. He's going to be more hawkish on that. But in terms of like the detention of Mahmoud Khalil and other pro-Palestinian activists and stuff, he was a bit more hawkish in deporting those type of individuals and stuff, and he's fighting in the courts for that. But in terms of the bare bones, the meat of what the America First movement wanted, he's just not going to do it. He's too establishment.
It's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yep.
With the America First movement. We are moving in that direction. Even under Joe Biden, we were kind of moving in that direction with the different things that he put in place to start bringing American industry back. And the fact that Joe Biden was starting to like question, even though he wasn't doing nearly enough, Joe Biden was on several occasions like, all right, we're going to pause shipments on weapons. It's like, and that freaked AIPAC and Israel out because they could see where this is going. So even under Joe Biden, this is why I said there's a third pathway between getting rid of the deep state and just submitting and not doing anything, which is the deep state slowly gets pushed and prodded and pulled into doing the right thing. It's almost like we accept that the deep state is a fourth institution of government that has to be persuaded to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And the deep state, to its credit, if it wants to maintain, I hate to say legitimacy because it doesn't really have legitimacy in the eyes of public, or at least not most people. But if it wants to maintain enough legitimacy not to have revolutions, it does have to contend with public opinion. So the deep state, just like any other phenomenon, just like any other machine entity group, has to. Heck, even Saddam Hussein, even Assad at times had to give in to public opinion on things. So the deep state has to as well, for sure.
Yeah.
But